Alright, this video is about Gabby Petito and a whole lot of corpses that were found. Mind you, there's really only two small areas by comparison with all the places that, well, the United States is huge. They knew round about where Brian Laundrie was. They knew round about where Gabby Petito was. And, well, that was one of my regulars called that one this one, commenting, "Hi Sean, just saw that you're live." Well, I'm not live now. I'm having issues with the internet staying on when I'm making videos. I don't have any problems with the internet the whole rest of the day. At all. Flawless internet. The moment I start making a video, then I start having issues. I guess let's get started. In those two areas, they found 10 other bodies. Then there's Gabby Petito and Brian Laundrie. That's a grand total of 12 dead people in just 2 searches. Those other 10 dead people, how much time did they spend searching for those folks? Now, one of the things that I like to do, I like to have a live video because then I can post links. Right now, I am resisting the, grabbing a hold of my mouse and looking for a link to put in the comments section. Obviously, there is no comment section because this is not a live video on YouTube. I'm recording it on my computer, and then it's kind of my test to see how well it works. I do want to know more about the other people who were found. So let's type in, what do we know about the other bodies found in the search for Gabby Petito? Alright. One of them says it's from a day ago, and it says publicity from Gabby Petito's case led to the discovery of 7 other missing people. Let's see, another one says, during search for Gabby Petito, police found at least 9 other victims' bodies. How hard did they look for those people? Did they look as hard as they did for Gabby? How many of those people were young, pretty, blonde-haired, blue-eyed white girls? Why did the families of those people have to wait for a blonde-haired, blue-eyed, pretty white girl to die so that their family members could be found? How many more thousands of bodies are there across the United States just from the last few years? How many of those people are Native Americans? Now, a lot of this stuff, it just says that there's 4 other bodies. 4 other bodies. 9 other bodies. It just says that they're bodies. It doesn't give us any details about them. It doesn't talk at all about the other missing people, except that they found a body. It's pretty nasty. Now, I wanted to make a video about Natalie Bollinger today, and I certainly will. But we also got to make room for current events and how they affect all of us. How many of those other bodies were men? I mean, we're selling this narrative that these things only happen to women. I know that at least 2 of the people who were killed were men. Seems that quite a few of the bodies came from Florida. At least that's the rumor on Facebook. But how many of those people would still be alive if the cops had done their jobs? See, Gabby Petito's case, if the cops had done their jobs, both Gabby and Brian would be alive today. Of course, if they had done their jobs, Gabby Petito would be in jail, and Brian Laundrie would also be in jail. Both of them broke the law. Both of them took part in physical altercations. The right thing to do in that situation is to separate them. I don't mean take one of them back to your squad vehicle and let the other one hang out at his van. I mean actually separate them. They obviously needed a fucking break from each other. It was obviously already a dangerous situation. Now, I'm not going to say that Brian Laundrie killed Gabby Petito. Matter of fact, I hold a great deal of reserve in that because there are so many other bodies found. What are the chances that Gabby Petito was killed by the same serial killer, the I-90 killer? That's what we need to call him. The I-90 killer has claimed at least 20 victims, most of them Native Americans, most of them between Denver, Colorado and Buffalo, Wyoming. Sorry, not Buffalo, Wyoming. What I meant to say is, God, what is the... It starts with the Billings, that's what it is. Now, some of those bodies might have been from the serial killer. Some of them might have been locals. I know that in many of these situations where Native American girls go missing, it ends up being another Native American that killed them, or another Native American that's harboring them, or the gross negligence of other Native Americans. Now, there's a chance that there's an old white guy and he drives I want to say it's a 1960s bright red stepside. I don't know if it's Chevy, Ford, or what. It's definitely an American vehicle. I know that this guy picked me up when my car broke down, my Chevy Corsica, and this guy picked me up and he wanted me to masturbate in front of him to some dirty magazines that he had in exchange for the ride. I was not down with that. This was years ago, probably like 5 or 6, no, it'd be longer than that, 7 or 8 years ago. What are the chances that he's out there killing people? I mean, being a sexual deviant doesn't make you a killer. Being an old person doesn't make you a killer. Driving around I really should have you guys look up something. Look up the missing women of Hardin, Montana. It's a YouTube video that I made. I was in Hardin, Montana. It was really cold, I was running out of gas, and I had to stop somewhere. So I stopped in Hardin. I went to a McDonald's there to get something to eat, and I ran into a couple of Native Americans there. John Nomi, and I don't remember what Gilbert's last name was. John Nomi, the next time I saw him, he was with his girlfriend. And they told me about how there's over 100 missing Native Americans from that area in a 10-year period. That's a lot of missing people. Now, I've got some equipment that is specialized for looking for human beings. If somebody disappears in Chapel, Nebraska, I have a drone. It has video technology attached to it. I can fly it up and survey an area. Of course, it's not gonna get down to the real nitty-gritty. You know, it's only got a certain amount of range and a certain amount of power and a certain amount of time that it's gonna run. I'm gonna pause this video for a minute. Now, in many of these cases, we try to peg everything on white guys. It must have been a white guy. It must have been a white guy. It must have been a white guy. In many of these cases, we found out that, first of all, it's not white people. And second of all, in many of these cases, it's not even men. Now, don't get me wrong. The overwhelming number and overwhelming majority of these corpses were probably made by men. But what we're dealing with is a national epidemic of murder. How many of these people were shot? Chances are pretty good most of them were choked to death. That's very common. A lot of people are afraid of DNA evidence. If you shoot somebody, well, the blood goes all over the place. Their brains go all over the place. Their chest goes all over the place. Wherever you shoot them, you're leaving a lot of evidence. If you strangle somebody to death, you don't leave any blood. And a lot of murderers prefer to strangle somebody to death up close and personal. There's a lot of these sickos, they like to, well, it's a sexual control thing for them. They want to feel power. So what do? They'll rape somebody and literally strangle them to death while they're having sex with them. Some of these guys have actually bragged about it. One of the guys I was in prison with actually bragged about killing somebody while he was raping her and strangling her to death. Now, I don't know if that story is true. A lot of guys in prison like to tell stories that make them look or feel tougher. Some of them just say this stuff to piss people off. One of the guys that I was in there with, he made up probably 30 different stories about why he was in there. Everything from raping little kids to chopping the heads off of old people to all sorts of creepy shit. Now, obviously, this dude's in prison. He's not able to go kill anybody. But what about the ones who are still out? My biggest issue with being out and my name not being cleared, people just assuming the things that they do about me. What are the chances of a murderer getting away because people want to target me? Like with Natalie Bollinger, for example. Obviously, I didn't kill Natalie Bollinger, but because I'm different, they assumed that it was okay to blame me. They assumed that it was okay to try to frame me because they assumed my guilt. There's a possibility that Joseph Michael Lopez, who is the guy who shot Natalie Bollinger in the head, there's a chance he could have gone free. He could have walked free because the cops didn't want to do their jobs. I'm going to pause a moment again. Alright. biggest issues that we have in the world today is people just not caring. They don't care until it happens to them. But all of America cares about pretty white girls. You take out just one of those criteria. You take away her skin color. Sure, she might be skinny. She might be pretty. She might be a girl. But she might be Native American or black or Hispanic. And then she's not going to get this kind of attention. Plain and simple. Let's say she's a white girl. Let's say she's still pretty. But let's say she's 250 pounds. All of a sudden, America no longer cares. I'd like to know more about these other people whose bodies were found. I'd like to know why there was no searches for them before, or why these searches, if they did have them, came up with absolutely nothing. But then, while looking for Gabby Petito, they find all sorts of them. If they're finding this many bodies between just 2 parks that were not fully searched, how many more bodies are in those parks, first of all? And how many more parks contain dead people? How many times have you guys, let's say Washington State for example, lots of hiking trails all over the place. Beautiful, beautiful area. There's foliage on the ground, which if you guys have ever been to the Rocky Mountains or the mountains around Boulder, Colorado, you know there's not a lot of ground cover. Trees, yeah. Rocks, yeah. Grasses, yeah. But you go to Washington State, I mean, you've got ferns, you've got blackberries, you've got skunkweed, you've got all sorts of stuff popping up all over the place. You got, what do they call those, trailing vines, is that right? The climbing ivy and things of that nature. You got all sorts of stuff like that in Washington State. There's so much ground cover there that a woman went off the side of the road, a major road in the middle of a city. She went off the side of the road and all of the foliage covered her vehicle. They couldn't find her because all of the foliage from the ground was covering her vehicle. So how many times have those folks in Washington State gone walking down one of those trails? You're out there with your kids, you're out there with your wife, you're having a family trip. You've probably gone to that park 100 times in your lifetime. There's probably a body sitting there within 100 feet of the trail that you walk on every time that you go through there. At some point through there. But it doesn't come across as a graveyard to you. For you, it's a pristine forest. It's beautiful. Gabby Petito, this situation has brought a lot of attention to how screwed up this nation is when it comes to pretty white girls. I mean, Gabby Petito was not a complete innocent in this situation. She did physically assault Brian Laundrie. There was marks on his face that prove that she got physically violent with him. There was no proof on her, no marks on her to show that he had been physically violent with her. Now, she was strangled to death. Some people might say, oh, well, you know, there's proof that she was strangled to death, so that's proof that he did. No, it's not proof that he did it. You have to link him specifically to the body. Not as in he knew the person who died. That's not good enough. You have to link him to the actual body, not the person. Once the person is dead, it's just a body. You gotta link Brian with her corpse. I hate that word. It's insensitive. And I am going to have to say I'm sorry because I do feel bad for saying it that way. I'm not apologizing to you fucking asshats. I'm apologizing to her family. Because it is insensitive. And I know all about insensitive. I deal with a lot of it, and I put a lot of it out there. If you're an asshole, I'm going to be extremely insensitive, and I'm going to have no fucking qualms about it. Gabby Petito's family is allowed to be as pissed off as they want to be. They have more right to be pissed off than Natalie Bollinger's family. Of course, I could be wrong about that. There's always the possibility that Gabby Petito's family did the same horrible things that Natalie's family did, but that's not coming out, is it? We got to give them the benefit of the doubt. Innocent until proven guilty. Prove to me with actual evidence that Brian Laundrie killed her. That's what I want. See, here's the thing about if I'd have killed myself after Natalie died, and I did try, by the way. They brought me back. It was not right, and as a result, I need to get a tattoo across my chest that says, "Do not resuscitate." It's necessary. I don't want to come back again. But if I'd have killed myself, Joseph Michael Lopez, for certain, would have gotten away. They would have not made the effort to catch him that they did. They would have gone, oh well, we pushed that dude to kill himself. He's probably the killer. We'll just call that good. That's not okay. We need to actually find out what happened to Gabby. And I don't necessarily mean we as in the general public. I mean, there needs to be closure because there is a good possibility that there's a serial killer at work here, and what are we doing about it? I watch a lot of videos that are fucking sick, like sick. It's legal to watch them. It's not stuff that I personally want to watch, but why do I? In order to catch these son of a bitches, you gotta try to understand their mentality. I don't have it in me. One of the videos that I was watching, there was a guy here in town who was telling me, hey man, you gotta watch this video, you gotta watch this video, you gotta watch this video. He's like, man, you know, you wanna know how sick people are in this world? I said, hey, I know how sick people are in this world. It's like, dude, you gotta watch the video. You gotta understand this is what actually goes on in the world. And he shows me the video, and it's this girl, right? She's got her hands behind her back. They're tied together. And this is, obviously, they're speaking Spanish, so maybe it's in a Spanish-speaking country, maybe it's just a Spanish community. They cut her arm off. After they cut her arm is dangling, attached to the other arm. And she's looking at her fingers on the arm that's got chopped off. I don't know what she's screaming, but she's definitely wanting them to stop. One of the guys goes up and smacks her in the face. Then they cut off her other arm. She's got these two stubs. They're bleeding. She just wants it to stop. She just wants them to stop. And then they cut her head off. I don't want to watch that. It's like, hey man, you gotta finish it. This is the best. Seriously? The best part? Are you fucking kidding me? and they're just laughing and joking about it in the video like it's just an everyday thing. I know that shit goes on in the world. I don't have to see the fucking video. Oh God, that burned. I'm not crying. I got smoke in my eye. That's not the only video out there. There are sites that are dedicated to showing this stuff. It's entertaining to some people. To watch a little girl get her head cut off. Now this girl was probably, she looked, I don't know, 15, 16 maybe. Then there's one where there's a woman in Africa. She's a bigger woman and they're dragging her. And she's stark ass naked. She's not wearing a goddamn thing. And they start hacking at her neck with a machete. You know, when they cut somebody's head off, it's not like you see in the movies where it's one swing and it's done. No, they go at it, like hacking and hacking and hacking. One video, it shows 4 women who were killed by the cartels. They shot these women in the head. Then they cut off their heads, they cut off their arms, they cut off their legs and threw them in a pile. Should we ignore the murders here because the cartels would have cut them into pieces, so it should be okay? That seems to be the mentality of a lot of people. A lot of people, when I talk about the harm that I have gone through in my lifetime, they want to tell me about how it's worse elsewhere. Does that make it okay? That's what we need to look at. If it's not as bad as somewhere else, does that make it okay? We take a look at rape in the United States. And then you look at rape in Africa. In many cases, after a woman is raped in Africa, she's put into a stack of tires, and the stack of tires is lit on fire. They slice her up, cut off her mammaries. She's still alive when they light the thing on fire. What kind of a sick human being does that? Now, is it okay to rape somebody in the United States just because you didn't cut off their breasts? Just because you didn't stuff them in a tire and light it on fire, does that make it okay? No, it doesn't. The excuse that it's worse somewhere else is always a terrible excuse. I have to worry about Leslie Snell. Mind you, this is one of my predators in this town. I'm not talking a sexual predator. I'm talking about someone who abused her position and committed felonies so that she wouldn't get in trouble for crimes that she committed. Some of those crimes are actually on my YouTube channel. But I have to worry that if Leslie is killed by somebody while I am not locked up, that I will get blamed for her death. I have to worry that if someone kills Robert Warnick, that I will get blamed for his death. 10 months after I made that video about the missing women of Hardin, Montana, a young woman named Selena Not Afraid disappeared. And Selena Not Afraid, well, they did more to try to find her than any other Native American I've ever even heard of. Now, I went from having 56 views on that, 56 views on the missing women of Hardin, Montana. Then one day, I find out there's 14,000 views on it. I'm like, what the hell? What's going on here? Selena Not Afraid disappeared from Hardin, Montana. The exact same place that I spoke about just 10 months earlier. And a lot of people up in Hardin, Montana wanted to make up a bunch of damn lies. Pretend that one woman claimed that me and a accomplice picked her up and drove her out into the country, and she had to throw herself out of the vehicle in order to get safe. There was other ones saying, oh, well, you killed that Natalie girl. You probably killed Selena, too. It was so fucked up, I even called the FBI and the Hardin Police Department and said, hey, you guys can get a hold of me. Here's my fucking phone number. Here's my email address. If people are going to claim that I did this, let's look into this. Obviously, it wasn't me. Obviously, since I was in Chapel, Nebraska, when that woman claimed that I gave her a ride and she had to throw herself out of the vehicle, she's an attention seeker. There are a lot of these. Most of these web sleuths are attention seekers. Kara Johnson Miles outright lied. She was allowed to have her bullshit, outright lies, put into my court cases and preventing me from having an honest court date. But it's okay, right? It's not okay. That woman committed perjury, among other things, such as impersonating an autism advocate. Now, this is not a little thing for those of us who are victimized because we're different. Those of us who are victimized because we're not like you. If Gabby Petito were a male, nobody would have given a shit. There would not have been all of this media hoopla. I suppose I probably ought to end this video. Hopefully it'll download properly. Why are cops not doing their jobs? Why is law enforcement not doing their job? Why is the FBI not doing their job? They won't do their job unless the media pressures them to do it. Meanwhile, if you're not a pretty white girl, the media is probably not going to pick it up. They're not going to make a big deal out of it. It's just another corpse, unless it's a pretty white girl. Here in America, we got a bad habit of condemning men based on circumstance. That's not okay. I am going to add that I made a friend last night. It's good to meet new people, and it's nice to make a new friend. God, I don't know the right thing to do. I know that getting myself locked up just to get myself locked up isn't productive. Every crime that I've committed, every single one of them in the last 5 years, has been in an attempt to save lives by getting heard. People wanted to treat me completely like shit because I was assaulted by Waylon Lolatai. But when he assaulted 6 more homeless people, or people that he assumed were homeless, in 2018, and he ended up on the news, Denver 7, Tony Kovaleski, they still didn't care what that man had done to me. Law enforcement in the state of Colorado did everything that they could to prevent me from turning them in. Everything they could. And those tactics are nationwide. If they don't find the killer, they usually find somebody they can call mentally ill and peg it on them. Or a homeless person and peg it on them. Or even better yet, a homeless person who is mentally ill. It's an easy railroad, why wouldn't they? Enhances their prestige. They don't care about the fucking hell that people have to go through when they're locked up. About how most of the guards that are there are, well, worse than rent-a-cops. A lot of these people could not be actual cops. But they're working at a jail. They don't fit the psychological profile to be a police officer. They're too psycho, so where do you put them? You hire them in the jails and the prisons. And these people physically and psychologically torture you, and they get away with it because there's no body cameras. There is no audio recording. We gotta do something. We can't wait for law enforcement to get their heads out of their asses. We can't wait for these asshats to maybe finally change the laws 20 years from now. We can't wait. Gabby Petito is not the wake-up call. The other 10 bodies are. Wake the fuck up, America. We are fast becoming the shittiest country on the planet. Human trafficking in the United States is worse than anywhere else in the world. We are number one for human trafficking. I want you to get that through your head. We like to pretend that Russia has more human trafficking, and that China has more human trafficking, and India has more human trafficking. Especially India and China, because they have a much higher population. Oh yeah, and they're less likely to be white. But in reality, the United States beats all of these places. China has, 6 times our population, and we still have more human trafficking than they do. Get that through your head. The prison system isn't even counted in that human trafficking. Meanwhile, that is exactly what our prison system is. We're letting out child molesters and rapists. We're putting child molesters and rapists on probation because the prisons are full of potheads. Homeless potheads. Holy fuck. Between some hobo smoking a goddamn joint and a dude raping your fucking kids, which one would you rather have on the streets?